turn of the 20th century, New York City. Long before the Empire State Building rose above the Manhattan skyline and the Babe was swatting home runs out of Yankee Stadium, Irish immigrants and their families docked at Ellis Island, looking for a new start in a new land. Young Charlie Murray arrived on the shores of America, part ambitious, part savvy, and all hustler.
He was as far as we know, a street kid. His best friends supposedly growing up were James Cagney and George Raft, the actor.
And as he grew, those streets taught Murray not only how to survive, but also how to thrive, grease a palm, and turn a buck.
I just remember my father telling me the stories about my grandfather and how he had his hands in everything.
Everything from owning taxi cabs to dabbling in the lucrative underworld born during the days of Prohibition.
He was a bootlegger, and he worked for Dutch Schultz, who was the beer baron of New York City during Prohibition.
When we went downstairs to the basement, where my father grew up, it was just like you walked into this speakeasy. The bar was 50 foot long. There was bathtubs that were on the side, and we just went down there to play. But we were wondering what was going on down here, and as we got older, we figured out what was happening, and then we got told the stories about what they used to do down there.
Always by Murray's side, his beloved wife, Edna.
She was a wonderful lady, typical grandma, white hair. She grew up in Brooklyn.
We were close with her because my father made sure that we were. We were constantly over there every weekend, every holiday, and we had a blast with them. They were a lot of fun.
Her father, my great-grandfather, yes, did work. He was a chef and did work in the White House under Teddy Roosevelt's administration. I think he was probably a line cook. But hey, it's a good story.
Settling in the Woodside neighborhood of Queens on January 6, 1938, Charlie and Edna Murray welcomed the youngest of their 3 children, John Edward Murray.
My father had a nanny. He had a nanny. So during Prohibition, if you were a bootlegger, you were doing better than most people.
His dad and his mom, my grandparents, were very dedicated to their children. They were very dedicated to their religion, which was Catholicism.
And thus began John Murray's lifelong bond with the church. He attended grade school at St. Teresa's in Woodside, and following graduation, like many young men of his era, Murray enrolled at Graymore Seminary.
I think the times, too, called for it. I think it was more, if you want to say, in vogue, to be not afraid to say, I'm Roman Catholic and I'm not ashamed of it. I think it was a big thing back then to say, I'm one with my faith and I want to bring it a step further and become a priest.
My dad basically, like all Irish Catholic young men during the 50s, were always pushed into vocation or into religious life, which he did give it a try. It didn't really work out for him because he wasn't getting the call per se.
After lasting less than a year at Graymore, Murray ultimately found himself at prestigious St. John's Prep in Brooklyn, excelling in and out of the classroom.
I know that he had a blast in high school, that he was popular in high school, he swam.
And he also around this time became captivated by a young Catholic football coach making a name for himself in New York City.
Vince Lombardi was a product of New York City Catholic education. He was born in Brooklyn, of course, went to St. Francis Prep, and then continued on to Fordham. And he was basically someone to look up to, especially being a Catholic.
He embodied what America should be, what we think America should be. Strong faith, belief in your team, God, country, Green Bay Packers, right?
And that was his whole life was just surrounded by Vince Lombardi. And that's what we grew up like, was Vince Lombardi, the Green Bay Packers, Notre Dame football. There was no Giants and Jets.
When Vince Lombardi was overlooked by the Maras in the 60s, he ended up getting a job at the Green Bay Packers. My dad followed, that man to the Green Bay Packers to the tune of, of his, his ideals and his, his ways of thinking, if you will. Obviously, we know what happened to Green Bay Packers for the longest time under his reign.
After graduating from St. John's, John Murray reached a crossroads. With the grades to attend Purdue University, Murray had another appealing option, the Steamfitters Local 638.
The way you live in New York, you need to make money. And he saw what, at the time, a union steamfitter was making, and the beautiful part of learning a trade.
My grandfather, Charlie, went to him and said, hey, do you want to go to college, Purdue, or do you want to start making money and get married and have a family and support them?
Murray chose the latter, and with his career off and running and some money in his pocket, in the fall of 1959, 21-year-old John Murray decided to get some ice cream at a neighborhood parlor called Edibal's.
Yeah, well, then we know what happened after that.
Like Charlie Murray, Jack Burke arrived in New York with $1 in his pocket and a dream in his soul.
My father came over at the age of 19 from Athenry and Galway. He's one of 14, and he had nobody here, and he found a job as a jackhammer, and from there he went to the Railway Express, and he was saving all his money. And by the time he was in his 20s somewhere, he went and bought a bar with another guy, and then he met my mom.
And in 1934, Jack took a tall, striking Irish lass named Bridget Coleman to be his bride.
My mom was born in Ballyglunin, Galway, and Dad was born in Athenry, Galway, and they actually lived 5 miles apart.
Jack and Bridget settled in Queens, and soon after, Burke's Bar and Grill would be a Woodside staple, a stone's throw away from the home of Charlie and Edna Murray.
He opened up Burke's Bar and Grill in Woodside, New York, and it was an extremely volatile Irish community, of which a quarter of them spent every Sunday from 1 till about 10 o'clock at night at the bar after Mass.
The Burkes had 4 children, including identical twin girls, Maureen and Kathleen, born on September 13th of 1940.
We were always together. We went to school together, we came home together, we got in trouble together a lot. I think my sister was more a terror than me. We were always dressed in identical clothing, and then we were old enough to buy our own clothes. We still bought the same clothes, even though we were shopping in different stores. We were always asked to lead the parade of confirmation, communions, graduations, because we were twins. And we never called Maureen and Kathleen. We would call the Burke twins, the Burkies, the twin Burkes, the twinnies. We didn't even know our name.
The dynamic in the Burke household was simple. Bridget ran the home, and Jack ran the bar.
I mean, my mom tells me the story that the garbage men, when the garbage men were done with their route, and they're done at like what time, 8 in the morning, they would knock on my grandfather's door, my mother's house, and say, let's go, Jack, down to the bar. We want to go drink. Our shift is over, let's go. And when you're a business owner, you go, the customer's always right.
I don't think he understood twins. You know, you can't buy one pair of roller skates and one radio. My mom would balance that because she wouldn't tell him, but she'd go out and buy a secondhand bike or another radio or another pair of roller skates. So that was pretty tough when you're 8, 9, and 10, when those things were very important to you.
They never had any want. They were always dressed nicely. They had the first TV on the block. You know, I mean, they really also went to private Catholic high schools all the way through. Do I think it upset my mom that her father wasn't around? Of course, 100%.
After grade school at St. Teresa's, the twins attended high school at St. Michael's in Manhattan. They played basketball. Maureen was also a cheerleader. But the underlying challenges of being a teenage twin often made their way to the surface.
We were called the Legionnaires, you know, St. Michael, the Legionnaires, and we prayed, you know, and all that. And and Kathleen was always president of everything, and being a twin, you know, like together. And she was out of school one day, and they were having the elections for the Legionnaires, and they voted me the president. I ran home, and I was so excited, and Kathleen was sick. My sister was sick. So I ran up the stairs, and I said, guess what? Guess what? I said, Kathleen, they made me president of the Legionnaires. And she politely looked up at me and she said, well, that's because I wasn't there.
But after graduation in 1958, the bond of the identical twins was tested for the first time when Kathleen decided to pursue religious life and departed for the convent in upstate New York. Maureen locked herself in a room for 2 days.
18 years together, you know, to lose somebody like your right arm. When Kathleen made that decision, I was kind of shocked.
By 18, Maureen Burke was looking towards her new life, enrolling at the Berkeley School, and she started to date. And after one of those dates got a little sideways in a parked car, it led to a rare encounter with her seldom engaged father.
When I came in, I was sitting there and my father came down the stairs and he said, "Are you okay?" And I said to him, "Well," and I thought, wow, he's talking to me. He's going to sit down and chat with me. Good, great. It's only been 18 or 19 years. When I told him the story, I said I was very upset. And he turned around, he looked at me and he says, "Well, I told you to go into the convent with your sisters."
Her education at the Berkeley School landed Maureen a job at New York coffee shop Chock full of Nuts, where she soon discovered she'd be working under a living legend.
One day I was sitting there and this man walked in, and he was a black man and he had pepper and salt hair, and I looked and I said, "God, he looks familiar." And I said, "Gee, he's really handsome." And so I asked this woman, Joy, who was like the human resource person, I said, "That man looks so familiar." And she goes, "Yeah, it's Jackie Robinson."
I always said to her, "Why didn't you get his autograph or something signed to you?" Because he was Mr. Robinson. I worked for him. I wasn't going to ask my boss for his... I go, "Mom, the guy was the first African-American guy to play Major League Baseball."
So I got to know Jackie, pleasant, lovely, lovely, lovely man.
And right around this time, in the fall of 1959, 19-year-old Maureen Burke decided to get some ice cream at that famed neighborhood sweet spot, Ediballs.
My girlfriend Peggy and I were sitting on the stool having an ice cream soda, and all of a sudden we hear this voice, "Hey, you two, why don't you come on over and join us?" Well, Peggy and I turned around and went, "Oh my God." So Peggy goes, "What are you going to do?" I said, "Oh, what the hell, maybe they'll pay for the ice cream soda." And then John said to me, "Hey, my whole crowd is having a great day at Davies Lake up in New York State, and we're all going to barbecue, and there's a lake to swim in." And I thought, gee, that sounds pretty good. So I said, "I'd love to go with you."
A courtship had begun, despite a hang-up that has evolved into legend. Jack Burke and Charlie Murray, at times Woodside saloon keepers and rivals, didn't always see eye to eye.
They definitely crossed paths, I'm sure. I really don't know succinctly, what their dealings were with each other. But at the end of the day, it didn't matter.
By Christmas of 1959, John and Maureen were steady, serious, and ready for the next step. And on a Saturday afternoon, while en route to a wedding, a tuxedo-clad John Murray made a stop at the home of Maureen Burke.
I looked at him and I went, "Wow." I said, "You look great." He said, "Well, I just thought I'd come in and see you for a few minutes before I go." And he said, "I really wish you were coming with me." I said, "Well, I understand, I knew Larry, but I didn't know Gloria." So he just came out and he said, I just want to ask you something." I said, "What?" He said, "Would you marry me?" I went, "Sure." And he had to go about maybe 45-minute drive. He got a speeding ticket because he was so excited.
In October of 1961, John and Maureen Murray became husband and wife, married in their childhood church, St. Teresa's.
October 28th, 1961, at 10 o'clock in the morning, John and I got married. It was 85 degrees, October 28th. It was the hottest day of the year. And so it was a great wedding and everybody was happy. 208 people. Yeah, it was a great wedding.
Everyone was happy, but not everyone was present. Maureen's twin sister Kathleen was forbidden by the convent to enter the church and witness the nuptials.
She couldn't see because there were steps going up, and they were saying she was bouncing up and down. That didn't end too badly because we all went to the convent for the wedding party, and Kathleen was there, and we all had a nice breakfast together, and on we went to our reception.
As the 60s began, John and Maureen looked forward to a new life together, but John still had one more personal goal yet to achieve: enter the United States Marine Corps boot camp.
My dad went to Paris Island and he went through boot camp, and he lived that life. He really was disciplined in the way he lived, the way his house looked, the way we looked. The way, honorable, be honorable, don't lie. My dad had a famous saying that he always used for himself. I may not be right all the time, but I'm never wrong. And he would say that all the time because he believed in his convictions.
He did hold the United States Marine Corps to his heart with their ideals and their dedication and their discipline, and he instilled that in me and my two brothers for the most part.
While away on duty, the Murrays welcomed son Paul in August of 1962, and in December of 1963, along came John David. The Murray clan was complete in January of 1968 when Kevin was born. The three names pulled straight from John Murray's football index.
I'm John David Crow. Paul is Paul Horning.
My story's pretty funny. I was supposed to be a girl, and I was going to be Carol Dale, who was a famous tight end for the Green Bay Packers. Pretty name, right? Carol Dale Murray, right? I turned out to be a boy, and I was named after Kevin Hardy.
And for Maureen, having two baby boys 16 months apart at the age of 23 was a quick indoctrination into adulthood.
But she did it, you know. I remember the walks we used to go on, and she kept busy. She did. She really kept us busy.
In those times, there were certain things, especially from that sect of people, that there were certain things that were expected of you. And either you went into religious or you got married. End of story.
This is just normal.
Petrified. And John was not easy. John was a control freak. You can quote that.
John Murray, a young father himself, knew only one way to raise his boys, and at times it was a volatile combination of temper and discipline.
As a young kid, I knew not to test him.
He was a Marine. I don't have to say anything more of that. There was no nonsense. It was his way or the highway.
He had no idea what he was doing. He had no idea. He was young too. It was fun and scary at the same time. You didn't know what you were getting.
My dad was very black and white growing up. There's a wrong way and a right way, and that's it. And if you don't do the right thing, it's going to come back to bite you.
We had Vince Lombardi, we had the Marine Corps. That's what it was. And I'm not complaining about it. I don't say anything about it, but there was not a lot of hugs and kisses and this and that, and I don't think there was a lot of that with Vince Lombardi either.
I probably butted heads with him more than anybody, but at the same time, out of all the three brothers, I own a company right now. A lot of my talents are due to him.
And Maureen was always there, providing love, affection, and balance.
She was the opposite of my father. She was the touching, the hugging, the kissing. But at the same time, she knew that there was a team effort here to get forward, to make things work.
John and I were partners in that because we both wanted the same thing: to protect them, to give them a little leeway to grow.
One thing I will tell you about my mom, and she admitted this to me just recently, she's a little bit of a worrywart now. She worries about stuff that you shouldn't. But she said I was always like that. I just hid it from you guys.
In the late 60s, 70s, and 80s, the Murray boys were raised in their Glendale home on Union Turnpike, fixtures on the schoolyards and driveways, brothers, athletes, adversaries, never far from the watchful eye of their father.
He had us moving. We would never stop. He was involved in every single sport that we ever played, which was kind of annoying. He was involved in every single club that we were in, which was also kind of annoying because it was like I could not, or Paul, could not do what other kids were doing out there because he had his eye on us all the time.
He left very early in the morning. He got home at 3:30, so that's why he was mostly the coach of everything. And they should understand that. John David was insisting that he followed them around to watch them, which is a part of it.
Listen, he was a father that was around. You know what? I think back at that and say, that's good. That's a good thing.
Sports always a defining thread between John Murray and his sons.
That's what our relationship was mostly of, was that, the football, the basketball with the Knicks, and like every Friday night was like 2 Schaefer night and a pie. You know what I'm saying? And that was every Friday night when the Knicks played on Channel 9. My
father had the megaphone at the football games in high school. Murray, you missed that block, Murray.
I mean, you had to escort the guy out of the crowd half the time because he was so loud.
And my friends would be like, "Oh, your dad, what's up with your dad doing that?"
So you know his passion was within his kids, but he would never tell you.
For John, fatherhood was also met with continuing career success, earning the reputation as one of the top steam fitters in all of New York City.
That's true. My dad, he would drive all over the 5 boroughs, and he would be like, "Put the heat in there, put the ventilation system in there, did that." So it was funny, and we were all like, "Yeah, here we go again."
He was running jobs bigger than I've ever seen. And to do things like that, you just can't be a steam fitter. You have to be a top steam fitter.
He also had probably the greatest gift. He was an honest man. You know, when he worked for contractors as a steam fitter / foreman, the contractors that he worked for trusted him.
And that same trust bled through with the men John Murray led through the day-in, day-out grind of what was at times an unyielding profession.
Some of these guys used to go to the bar at lunchtime, and he'd go and get them back on the job.
Let's call him Father John. He used to make sure that everybody was back to work after the lunch hour was over. He used to make sure that everybody's paycheck got to the wives, because back in those days, it was like wives didn't see paychecks. But my father made sure that they got their paychecks. And then when they were out of line, he would put them right back into line, and he wouldn't care what anybody said.
Now, he had a great skill in managing and knowing people's ins and outs, if you will. That was his gift. And he was always 2 or 3 steps ahead of everything because he had to.
In the late 1970s, New York was defined by blackouts, Studio 54, and the night that Reggie belted 3. Maureen decided it was also time to go back to work, first at the US Open tennis tournament.
My job was to be a hostess, to greet them and bring them into the tents and everything. And I had to dress in my tennis outfit, and they all wanted to know who I was, and I said, I'm just a nice person. To see them play and to be in their presence, like Jackie, it was great. It was great.
Then in 1978, Maureen traded in her tennis attire for a business suit, accepting an administrative position at Aero Shirts on prestigious Fifth Avenue in Manhattan.
She was excited about getting out and contributing and being part of the world where I think she wanted to be, like when she was 18. I don't know how much my father liked it, but that's besides the point.
It was definitely an ego enhancer. She probably was more than capable of running the line, but like in all businesses, especially, retail / corporate, which she was, into, that had its limitations with women, but those were the times.
It probably helped her psyche too. Being home with she never really experienced as a young person going out and with friends after work and having maybe a drink or two or, a dinner. So that kind of helped a little bit too. Maureen
left Aero in 1984, but her career continued, opening her own catering company, The Party Cart.
We sought out clients, first friends, family, then we started getting other people, then I started getting a couple of corporations in Manhattan. I worked for Ralph Lauren, his Spanish party at Lord & Taylor's. I did Erica Came From All My Children. I met her. It was a fantastic time. It was the time of our lives. We had so much fun.
And when it came to family fun, in the 70s and 80s, the Murrays found it on the shores of the Atlantic Ocean. Members of the Ocean Club at Atlantic Beach. Summer days and nights filled with wine, song, sand, and surf, and it defined an era.
I remember one day in 1969, we're going to a beach club in Atlantic Beach, and I'm like, having no idea what's going on. But when we got down there, I knew immediately my father fell in love with this place.
We had a tent at night. We would drop the tent because we stayed overnight, and the people were right next to us. You could hear them snoring. We became beach bums.
I could sit here for 5 hours and tell you, I could write a book and tell you what happened from the time I would say 1973 to 1985 was just a zoo down there.
It was like we were in our Mecca. And it was actually a place that I still to this day think is sanctuary, because when I go down there, still to this day, I still have a cabana there, is that, it kind of, things kind of, go by the wayside. You put things in perspective. And it's because of the memories that I have there that I can do that to this day.
We used to joke, why don't we ever go to Disney? My father goes, all right, we'll go to Disney. We'll give up the beach club for the summer. And then we'll go to Disney for 1 week. Because that's how much it's going to cost with five people. So we went, oh, no, you're not giving that up.
The beach club was not hedonistic, is a good word. It was a place to enjoy, to grow, to deal with people, and that's why our sons have learned how to deal with people.
It was everybody that was like us. You know what I'm saying? It was like a middle class, blue collar beach club. Everybody having a blast, just fun everywhere.
The late 80s and 90s were a time of weddings and new beginnings. John David married Patty in 1987. Paul and Christine wed in '89. Kevin and Kathleen said I do in 1999. And in 1992, when John and Patty gave birth to Ryan, Maureen Murray, at only 52, was now a grandmother.
I remember pushing Jonathan all over Bell Boulevard. We tried to help. I wasn't working. I started letting catering go. We were getting ready. We knew we were going to retire soon. And I said to John one day, I've done enough in my life.
A grandfather at 54, the Murray boys noticed a difference in their normally rigid father.
I used to sit there and laugh. My kids, he was lovey-dovey with them, holding them, kissing them, and we didn't get that. We didn't get that from my dad. My dad was not, and my mom will tell you this too, he was not a lovey-dovey dad.
It put a smile on his face different than I've ever seen one.
My mom and dad, especially my dad, enjoyed my children probably the most out of everybody. So, it's a good thing. And I have that I basically, hold to my heart very dearly.
In 1999, John Murray, closing in on a 40-year career as a decorated steam fitter, knew it was time for the next step in his own life.
The door opened and he came in and he looked at me and he said to me, I'm never going back. I said, never going back where? He said, I'm done, I'm retiring. I went, oh God. He said, I'll help you with the catering business. And I looked and I went, oh no, you're not. I'm done. I am so done.
Suddenly retirees in their early 60s, John and Maureen took a vacation to Florida, a destination that would become a bit more permanent when Maureen, an unwittingly savvy investor, surprised John by buying a condo.
I bought 2 stocks at a car accident and I got $10,000 out of it. I took 5 and I invested in Bristol Myers Squibb, I don't know anything about stock, and Chevron, 5 each. I don't know how long ago that was, but I never touched it. It tripled, it double tripled, it went up. That I had made from $10,000 to a little over $100,000. I said, you don't have any say. I am telling you. He said, Maureen, it's fine. We're going to take it.
The next decade plus, John and Maureen were snowbirds, days filled with golf, grandparenting, and the good life. But in December of 2012, news that, while not unexpected, would rock the family to its foundation.
1985, he was diagnosed with asbestosis. When I told him what was happening, he said, Maureen, this may lead to a very, very bad disease called mesothelioma. The more than likely, people that's diagnosed with asbestosis usually get mesothelioma, but they don't know when.
It was always something in his brain that he had the potential, with knowing that he had, scarring in his lung, that, something could have developed from. He ended up getting the grand prize, meso.
When the shock came, now was how long is he going to last?
Everybody knew from the time that you're diagnosed, it's average 18 months.
For the next year and a half, the Murray family processed and prepared for the inevitable.
What can we do? What are we going to do? And if nothing can be done, let's try to live the best life you can and what you have remaining. Very simple.
It sucks. You hope that he doesn't suffer or she doesn't suffer. But at the same time, you can kind of maybe get to know yourselves better with it.
And for 18 months, family and friends did say their goodbyes. Middle son John David in the spring of 2014.
I remember the last conversation that I had with him. He said, I'll see you for Easter. And I said, no, you're not. You're not going to see me. And he just looked up at me and I looked down at him and I said, you did okay, Dad. You did okay. You know what? And I rubbed the top of his head and I walked out the door. And that was it. And I was okay with that.
Good story. My friend John Murray, who's not related to us, went to high school and college with John, and he was always in trouble. Got kicked out of Marist, doing bad things. John had a lot of demons, but my father saw something in him that he never quit on him. John was involved in a bad accident from drinking and driving. I asked my mom and dad, can you visit him in the hospital? John's sitting there in ICU, and my father walked in and went, Murray, you ever gonna learn? Like, you know, when is it gonna kick in? All the potential you have. He saw the potential in my friend. Well, it turns out my friend has become an oil options trader. He's got more money than God. And when my dad was dying, I said to John, I said, give him a call. My mom called me and your dad, he just got a call from John Murray. And John talked to him, and I'm in the kitchen, and all of a sudden I hear your father crying, wailing. And I go, Dad crying? You know, my father was not a crier. He was not a crier at all. I don't think I'd ever seen my father cry in my life. My father told my mother, John Murray just called me and said that I have no regrets and that it's okay. You did your good job, you have no regrets, and that's it. My father I think my father never heard that from anybody. So to have it from somebody who he never stopped having faith in was really hit home.
And in his final days, John Edward Murray was at peace.
I'm going to give you one word, faith. He had more faith than any person I know.
He knew he was in good hands, where he was going. He didn't care. He just knew he was going to be okay.
And this was his Catholicism coming in, how strong his faith was. He knew he was going to heaven. There's no ifs, ands, or buts. I'm going to heaven. I've done the right thing in life.
He asked me to take him to Mass one more time. So he said, so we took he called it his chariot. And so down it was low, because it was downhill to the altar, in his chariot, came back from communion, and he stood there, and everybody stood up and clapped. That's when I thought I was going to lose it.
As Maureen sat with John in his final hours, his last words to his beloved wife were, well, they were classic John Murray.
Don't talk.
Don't talk.
Don't talk. Maureen. Oh, Maureen.
It really was funny. I looked at him, and Kathleen goes, well, he hasn't changed.
And with laughter, tears, and no regrets, John Murray passed away on April 17th, 2014.
You know my last words that I said to him? I told him I loved him. I never told my father that I loved him. Never. And he never did to me either. But he heard it from me because he really couldn't talk. And I felt good about that.
Growing up as a kid with him, it was like you knew he was good. And as I got older, he let us do what we wanted to do. He let us grow, and we did.
He was the type of guy that would not look for a pat on the back, because he never was the type of person to say, I did that. I did that. He didn't want that. And that goes back to his religion. He would try to help the less fortunate. How many people do we know like that today?
He did what he had to do for his family. He worked hard, he worked honestly hard. And, you know, looking back at the times that when I was born and hit their ages, you know, they did the best they could.
He had a kindness that was hidden because of his background and work was always kind of tough. The respect he had for the men he worked for, I don't think anybody ever reached that point in life in a position that they respected him. I know the boys loved him. I know the grandchildren loved him. I found that a lot of people cried when he died. A lot of people expressed laughter to talk to me, so he made people laugh. You can't tell a book by its cover. I can only end it with that.
In the weeks following John's passing, Maureen was in her Florida home when she learned that John's final words to her were not in fact, don't talk, but those final words came from an unlikely source, next-door neighbor Bruce Zielinski.
He knocked on the screen, and I opened the door, and then I was standing in the vestibule, and he was on the outside of the screen, and I said, and he was doing this, And he said, I have to give you, I have to give you a message, I think was the exact words. Well, John asked me to tell you something. I said, like John Murray? He said, yeah. So I said, well, what's the message? He sent it, he wanted to make sure that I tell you that he loved me. I said, what? Tell Maureen I love you. Well, that's when the meltdown came. Jesus, Bruce, are you kidding me? He said, it took me a week and a half to come and say that to you. And I said, it's okay, Bruce.
Maureen Murray forges on now, the matriarch of a family with 3 grown sons and 8 grandchildren. Through heartbreak and hope, holding her family tight, knowing there is always a guiding light from above, helping to lead the way.
Took one part of the family to Barbados, and I took the other part of the family for a wonderful week in Italy. We work hard at it. I have wonderful memories, and sometimes they sustain me during the night. I know he's looking out for me. I mean, there's too many things happening that I see around me, which I know, and I have faith that he'll pull me through if I don't make it.
But for Paul, John, and Kevin Murray, they know their parents did make it, 50 years and counting, binding an unassailable success as people, parents, grandparents, and above all else, a loving couple.
They were great parents. They were. And as a couple, they just made that work too. You know, you marry that many years, you have to. As far as I'm concerned, it was all okay. I would never change a damn thing at all, ever.
You can get caught up in the kids, and that becomes your life. And you forget about what you were before the kids came. My mom and dad never forgot that. They would go away to Barbados for a week together. They would go up to those stupid, up in the Poconos with the heart-shaped tubs and stuff. I mean, funny stuff like that. You laugh, right?
Both him and my mom, in their journey together, their vocation in life was to pay for their house, raise their children the best they could, and be there as as good human beings for each other and for their family. There's one thing I will always say about my father and mother, for the most part, they were grounded. You know what? You knew that if the shit was hitting the fan and you needed to get a good answer, or at least kind of get a good plane to be brought back to reality, there's no too fine of people that would put things in perspective for you. That's how they were.
I look back as I don't have any regrets of our life together. God has been very good to us. If God gives me a few more years with some health, I probably would leave here probably the happiest woman in the world, and that's the truth. I think I've done everything I had to do in my life, and I had one hell of a time.